Before we start, I suggest you to subscribe for more creepy content. Before we dive in, grab your favorite blanket and those tasty snacks you've been craving. We encourage you to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Let us know which tales you believe are real and which ones might have come straight from a storyteller's mind. So, without further ado, let the chilling stories begin. It all happened on a stormy Sunday night around 11 p.m. My parents were away on a holiday, leaving me alone in the house. It wasn't something new. It wasn't even the first time, and I was used to staying at home alone. The storm outside was fierce. I was on the couch, wrapped in a cozy blanket, trying to find something to watch on TV. I then decided to go to the kitchen to prepare something to eat. As soon as I had finished preparing my meal, the house intercom rang. At first, I thought it might be a glitch caused by the storm since it had happened other times. After all, who could it be on a Sunday night at 11 p.m. during a storm right? However, I approached the intercom panel near the front door. I picked up the receiver with a slightly trembling hand. My voice shook as I said, "Hello?" I expected static or maybe even the voice of a delivery person on the other end. Instead, a hollow silence greeted me. My parents were away, and there was no way I had ordered anything. I decided to call my parents just to be sure. They confirmed that they hadn't ordered anything either. I looked out the window, wondering who would be standing outside in this weather. I hesitated, then cautiously spoke into the intercom again. "Leave the package by the door. I'll get it later." My voice was steady, but my heart still raced. For a moment, there was silence, and then the intercom went dead. No static, no noise, just the sound of the storm outside. My heart pounded even harder as I stood there. That night was a long one. The storm raged on, and every creak of the house made my imagination run wild. Who had been at my door? Why had they called me in the first place? When the morning finally came, the storm had passed. I ventured outside, my heart pounding as I approached the front door. The intercom panel was a mess. Wires torn out, buttons smashed, and the casing cracked. It was clear that someone had intentionally destroyed it. As I stared at the wreckage, a cold realization settled over me. Someone had tried to lure me out of the house during the storm, and when their plan failed, they had taken their frustration out on my intercom. The question remained, who would do such a thing, and why? The uncertainty gnawed at me. The storm had brought more than just rain and wind. It had brought something sinister to my doorstep. It happened during a Halloween sleepover a few years ago while I was with my friends Alex and Mike at Alex's house. We were on the living room couch. We were watching a horror movie as usual on Halloween night. As the movie went on, the tension in the room grew. We'd jump at every jump scare, and the atmosphere got so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. But then, just when things were getting to the peak of scariness, we started hearing faint noises coming from upstairs. At first, we didn't pay much attention to it, as we knew it was just the old house being itself, creaking and groaning like old houses do. But then, we heard it again, but this time footsteps were coming from upstairs. We paused the movie and looked at each other. We were trying to focus and try to hear the footsteps better and understand where they were coming from. I remember Alex laughing nervously, trying to make light of the situation. "Probably just the wind," he said. We shrugged it off and resumed the movie, but the unease was still there. The footsteps kept coming and going, and we tried to ignore them. We turned up the volume of the movie, hoping it would drown out the sounds. But no matter how loud the screams on the TV got, the footsteps were still there. Alex paused the movie and said, "Should we check it out?" His eyes darted towards the stairs. Mike and I exchanged glances. We didn't want to seem scared. Reluctantly, we agreed and slowly got up from the couch. Our footsteps were loud in the silence of the house as we made our way upstairs. As we climbed the creaky steps, we hesitated at the top of the stairs, unsure of which direction to go. The sound seemed to be coming from down the hall. The hallway was dimly lit. As we followed the sound, we realized it was coming from one of the bedrooms. We exchanged glances again, silently deciding to check it out. Alex was in the lead this time. As he slowly pushed the door open, we discovered mud footsteps all over the room and the window wide open. Alex closed the window and the door, and as we were walking down the corridor again, we discovered new mud footprints all over the corridor leading downstairs right where we were watching our film. We decided to search the rest of the house, just to be sure. We checked every room, every closet, and even the basement. But there was no one there. We decided to call the police, just to be safe. The dispatcher took down our statement, and a few officers arrived shortly after. We explained everything, the sounds, the footsteps, the open window. They looked around the house, but they didn't find any signs of forced entry or anyone hiding. To this day, I can't shake off the feeling of that night, the unease, the footsteps, and the open window. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when my friend Mark and I decided to take our motorbikes for a ride through the woods. We rode for hours, weaving through narrow trails, feeling the thrill of the open road and the rush of adrenaline. After hours of riding, we found a small clearing to take a break. We stopped our motorcycles and we removed our helmets. As we sat there, sharing stories and enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. A figure, dark and indistinct, stood at the edge of the clearing. At first, I thought it was just a wandering animal, but as I focused my gaze, I realized it was a person. "Hey, Mark, do you see that?" I said, nudging my friend and pointing toward the figure. Mark squinted and nodded, his expression growing more serious. We watched as the figure slowly moved towards us, its steps deliberate and measured. I told Mark that maybe this person was lost and needed help, but there was something strange about him. As the figure drew nearer, I saw it, a glint of metal in the dappled sunlight. An axe. The person was hiding an axe behind his back. Fear gripped me, and I looked at Mark, his eyes wide with the same realization. We knew we had to get out of there, and we had to do it fast. Mark scrambled to his feet and started his motorbike, and he sped off, disappearing into the woods. I fumbled with the key in the ignition of my motorbike, my hands trembling. Panic surged through me as the engine stubbornly refused to start. I could feel the weight of the approaching presence, the ominous aura that seemed to surround the figure. Finally, with a desperate twist of the key, the engine started. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I raced after Mark. As I caught up to Mark, I spared a glance over my shoulder. The figure was close behind, its dark form giving chase. My mind was a whirlwind of terror and confusion. I pushed the throttle harder, willing my motorbike to go faster. The wind whipped against my face, and I could feel the figure's presence receding slightly. We rode for what felt like an eternity, the tension in the air palpable. Finally, we burst through the edge of the woods and onto a road. As we tried to steady our racing hearts, the sound of approaching sirens reached our ears. A parade of police cars and officers on foot descended upon the area, swarming the woods with purpose. As we rode away from the scene, the gravity of the situation sank in. Our leisurely ride had turned into a nightmarish encounter with someone who meant us harm.